So let me introduce the panel moderator for multimodal logistics, Mr. Sanjay Desai. Sanjay is a supply chain professional who runs his own advisory consulting practice based out of Singapore. He sits on advisory board member on multiple startups and small medium enterprises located in Asia. He also runs Humana International, handling talent development and executive placements in supply chain domain across the Asia region. He's an honorary life member for Institute of Directors India and also serves as an overseas advisory member on the board of SME Chambers of India. Prior to this, he has led diverse and world-class supply chain verticals for MNCs like Verifone, Huntsman, Thermo Fisher Scientific, Johnson Diversey, Dell, Apple, ExxonMobil, and a few more, and one of which I cannot pronounce.
No, I also lost, okay. I also don't remember. 12 companies in 40 years.
So
right.
Sanjay ji, please, welcoming you as moderator.
Yeah.
And now I call upon stage our panel speakers. Put your hands together for Chetan, Mr. Chetan Kumria, founder at Xcell Supply Chain. Rajat Verma, VP, ISCM and Customer Service, Hamilton Housewares. Mr. V. Raju, Business Head and Senior VP, 3PL Contract Logistics at Avvashya, CCI, All Cargo. And Mr. Xerrxes, Master President at Association of Multimodal Transport Operators of India.
Thank you. Please take your seat. Nice meeting you. I'll just move around. It's a bit too bright and too bit low there. All right. So thank you so much. We have roughly about 40 minutes and we need to cover quite a lot. So guys, so let's start with the introductions. Rajat, straight away. Starting with you.
All right. So, hi guys, I'm Rajat Sharma. I manage the supply chain and customer experience for Hamilton, which is known by the popular brand Milton. I've been through telecom, pharma, white goods, electronics, etc. And I think supply chain has been a great journey, pre or post COVID, anything. And across these industries, I think there's been a great amount of learning. I love to connect, I love to discuss, and I definitely would love to chat up with Anand on the social aspect of what is happening. And we've had a lot of discussion. Somebody was asking us about what's happening. There's a lot of discussion happening. Unfortunately, the truth is there's no work happening.
Anyone? Just go around quick. Yeah.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Chetan Kumria. Two things. One is the photograph that you see, and I don't look alike. So, that's one distinction. The other thing is that that's 10 years old. So, don't mistake that. I am a supply chain and logistics professional with over 23 years of experience. Now, I look younger, don't go by that. But yeah, I've worked across many different industries, electrical, electronics. I worked with Schneider Electric in Hong Kong and in Singapore. I worked with Baxter Healthcare as the director of supply chain for India and South Asia. Last assignment 5 years back was I was heading procurement and supply chain for a liquor company, spirits and wines company called Pernod Ricard, which is a French major. You must know all the brands. Chivas Regal, 100 Pipers, Absolute Vodka, Beefeater, Jameson, etc., etc. I was leading the supply chain there, and 5 years back I set up my venture in supply chain with a vision and mission to bring in 4PL in India, which has been talked about a lot, has been a concept there outside India, but in India we are still stuck at 2PL or 3PL. So the journey started with advisory as well as with execution. So we are still at 3PL stage, moving on to 4PL with few of our clients. So that's about me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is V. Raju. I am the Senior Vice President for Contract Logistics in All Cargo. Specialist in a vertical called Chemical, Food and Pharma, Pan India. And also the business head for contract logistics. I carry with me almost close to 35 to 36 years of experience in supply chain management. covering every single vertical or field in supply chain management. That includes freight forwarding, custom clearance, transportation, setting up the container freight station like Gateway Distriparks, setting up warehouses like Logistics Park at Panvel, so on and so forth. With All Cargo, it's been almost close to 6 to 7 years. I'm associated with a number of IIM institutes, pan-India, in guest lectures, and also writing a number of articles on logistics and supply chain management. Interesting to participate in this panel discussion and look forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My introduction is relatively short. I'm the president of the Association of Multimodal Transport Operators of India, which is the only multimodal association, truly multimodal association in India, actually. And I'm also the managing director of the master group of companies, having diversified interests in shipping, power, IT, and logistics. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll start with you. Being the president,
Sure.
you take the lead. What is the main principle behind using a multimodal?
Thanks, Sanjay. See, basically, I think multimodalism is the only real essence of a good and efficient supply chain model. Multimodalism consists of all walks of transportation, which is air, sea, rail, road. It is the combination, basically multimodalism is a single document, a bill of lading, showing minimum two or more modes of transportation to ensure a quick, timely delivery of your goods. It's more or less based on a hub and spoke model as well, or it can be via seamless flow of what you call the goods from, say, a sea to road and then via rail, etc. So I think if we always talk of the increasing costs of logistics and various figures. In fact, yesterday I was in Delhi and they were all talking in another panel discussion, and they were talking about the logistics costs being 10 and 15%, whereas recently the NCAER has very categorically stated that the logistics cost is close to 8 to 9%. And this can only be brought about by an efficient supply chain model via multimodalism.
Perfect. So let me give an example or a question. I'm shipping something from Chicago. It comes via ocean to Singapore, and then from Singapore, I'm shipping it by road maybe to Malaysia, and from Malaysia, it may take probably air into Malaysia. Would that not be considered as a multimodal, even in the normal sense of the transaction?
Well, it depends on if it's basically you have to have multimodalism. The essence is that it's one vendor, one document, one vendor.
One document, one vendor.
You are answerable. One person is giving you this basket of services under one multimodal transport document.
Perfect. So, Chetan, let's talk about differentiation, right? One vendor, one document, one responsibility. So, how does multimodal differ from intermodal?
Okay, so Xerrxes just answered that, it has to be one document.
Yes.
Then it becomes multimodal. And if you are engaging different carriers, transportation given to Xcell, then, sea freight given to APL, etc. and all, then it's a multi-contract, then it's a intermodal.
Correct. So as a shipper, I can go different ways also. Right?
We can go different ways. But remember that as a shipper, what you need to do is, if you are giving it as a multimodal transport, then the whole designing and optimizing of the whole solution has to be with the multimodal provider, versus here you have to do it yourself. So you have to build in resources, you have to make the team, you have to put in tools. So all that you have to do to build that capability of multimodal in-house.
Yes.
So you guys are wise enough to select which mode you would like to do.
So design basically, right? Design and optimizing it and owning the ownership of it also.
Ownership of it, of course.
Perfect.
Yes.
Let's go to Rajat and let's talk about dependence on truck transportation in the whole area, right? And India depends on truck transportation probably more than most of the countries that I've worked with, right? It's probably the highest population, almost close to 70, 75%. We don't have much inland waterways that we don't use actually, right? And given the whole scenario and what Chetan said in terms of optimizing ownership and executing it end to end, what opportunities are there for multimodal in India now? And especially if you had heard Mr. Shobit saying something in the morning, which probably you did not hear.
So I think with a country like ours, where the distance is something that you cannot ignore. We're moving stuff thousands of kilometers across the Indian borders. There is a fair amount of possibility even in the inland waterways. There's a huge possibility on the coastal waterways, and there's stuff going on all around. Unfortunately, what we have not seen is a lot of speed in the yesteryears, which by now, in my view, we should have been using at least the coastal ways far more efficiently, which unfortunately is not the case. But in the past 2 years, what we've seen is, let me take a recent example, in fact. I think about a month back, we were listening about this project at Varanasi, which is correcting the eastern freight corridor. Yeah, the eastern freight corridor. Now that's a project which will give a huge opportunity to people who are moving a lot of goods north to east and east to north. And let me tell you, manufacturing bases in the east have grown 250% in the last 4 years. Right? The manufacturing volume from east has grown 250%. Imagine the kind of impact that we are creating, and there is obviously a saving that everybody is looking at when they go and manufacture in that sector, whether it is for consumption in that sector or not. But there is a chance to multiply that, which we are not doing because the freights are fairly higher. Now that said, I think between multimodal, intermodal, there are organizations which are managing both ways. But like we were all discussing today, visibility, other than the one document fundamental, visibility is going to play a big role. In intermodal, for as long as we've operated, it was a hell of a task to keep chasing various vendors. Even the handover from one vendor to the other, one partner to the other, the visibility is dropped. So I think that's a big challenge.
Sure. Visibility has always been called as holy grail of supply chain, right? And we have not been able to figure it out, even despite the technology we have. Are you alluding that only manufacturing companies can be beneficial to use multimodal? Is that the statement?
Oh, no. I think all organizations that are using movement today,
yes,
right, whether it is intermodal or single operator, single channel, like we were transporting goods from west to east on the roads. And the moment the railway came up, saying that, okay, we've got a couple of rakes there and you can, shift some of your loads to the railways. I mean, it's up for the grabs for everybody, and there's a time saving, there's a cost saving, there's multiple levels of savings there. So I think whether it is food, whether it is pharma, whether it is manufacturers, even traders, for us, when you do imports and exports, when I used to do high sea sales, why would I transfer partners if I had the multimodal visibility in a single partner, single channel feature?
Perfect. And getting Mr. Raju in, what are the benefits of and very specific to the party, right? Who is in the best position to take a decision? Should I go multimodal or should I go something else? And are these benefits available for everyone in the ecosystem, or is it only one person or one party enjoying the fruits?
I think as my colleagues in the panel described to you, multimodal currently stands as one of the best means for movement across seas, across the road and land infrastructure, and also the best available means to ensure savings in time. Look at, let's say about 20 years back, I remember when I used to work for terminals in Avvashya, we used to find it extremely difficult to ensure a cargo that arrived from Europe, offload it in JNPT, and then try and catch the train for ICD Patli or ICD Gati Shakti in Delhi. We used to wait for days together just to get a booking. The main objective then was to ensure that the transit time is the lowest. But unfortunately, we could never get a booking because the number of rail services were the least at that particular point of time. And the rates could really be very high at that time because there was no competition. You had only Concor, which used to provide us the rail services. And then once it reached ISCD Gadihasru or partly, to move it to the factory or to move it to the customer's godown was another big Herculean task because you never knew when the train is going to reach Gadihasru so that the end buyer could plan on movement through trucks or by land. Gone are those days. The multimodal has improved. So the best deal would be the moment you are able to conclude a deal with a seller, let's say he is in US, let's say he is going to move the material from his factory in Los Angeles onto the port of Los Angeles. You know the transit time. You know their agents in India who will ensure that it moves straight away to Delhi or wherever that you need through the rail services connected through one single document, and also ensure that it is reaching your point of location wherever that you have mentioned in that single document called the CTD, the Combined Transport Document, or what we call it as a bill of lading, at the shortest possible time. So thus, the advantage is always with the buyer or with the consignee. There are also other parties who can avail of the advantages basically because you don't have to struggle with every single logistic service provider en route. Like you have the transport guy, like you have the custom clearance guy, like you have the shipping guy, like you have the customs guy. You don't have to struggle with each one of them at every location. So basically, multimodal ensures that there is a rapid service at the shortest possible transit time. The documentation process is quite simple. A single contract entered into, and the buyer ultimately has to only ensure and check on the transit times and the day when it is going to be delivered to him at the location nominated by him. Perfect. Thank you.
Very well answered. Moving over to you, Chetan, is it an industry agnostic solution, or does it apply very specific to a particular industry or a category like biopharma, vaccines, or it is regardless? And the second part of question is, if you are an organization which is either import heavy or you're a local sourced manufactured organization, what is the interplay between that?
I believe, the multimodal transportation, if we look at a larger picture first, then I'll come to the industry agnostic of it. India has a spend of about $220 odd billion spent on transportation, right? By 2025, this is poised to grow to about $330 billion. That's a huge spend. Now, out of this, 40% of the spend is contracted and 60% is spot, which is, freight buying largely. If we look at the total landscape out of this 220 billion, only about 40 odd billion dollars would be part load market and the rest is the full truckload market. Now, having analyzed all this, where is rail and sea here? Hardly 15 to 30% is a ratio which we don't even know. So while we are talking multimodal, sitting here and talking multimodal, in this huge spend, we are a long way, from there. Yeah. So we should keep that in mind. Yeah. But having said that, with the multimodal, focus which has come up from the government side, it is very heartening to know that government is looking at integrating ports, airports, transportation, highways, ministry, etc., all under the Gati Shakti program. I think this is going to change the shape of the landscape of multimodal in India. And, I think, you being the president of multimodal transportation, I think this is the time where we are now getting into a landscape which will be built for the future for the next, 10 to 20 years. And we all have a very key role to play. And this is where the industry side also come in now, that while the service providers will be getting ready, the infrastructure will be getting ready from the government side and the private player side who will be operating in the segment, the shippers have to have that confidence that, we should move our products through multimode. Now, what are the pros and cons of moving through multimode? One is that it can be used only for a longer distance. It cannot be used for shorter distance. So that is number one. We cannot do a 10-minute, we have been talking Zeptos through, cycle and motorcycle. That doesn't make sense. The other part of it is that, the industry needs to engage with the third parties who will provide this, multimodal transportation. I think while we are building for the future, the companies will have to look at inventory optimization. Why? Because their lead times will increase. If we are sending a goods from north to south through a truck and a rail combination, the cost will reduce, emissions will reduce, but the inventory holding will increase because the lead time increases. So safety stock has to increase. I think these are the parameters that we all have to keep in mind when we are, looking at from an industry-specific point of view.
Sure. Perfect. Rajat, getting you onto the screen, onto stage, right? Ownership. Let's talk about ownership. Because yes, it's one document, one ownership, we talked about it. But in a multi-mode fraud, how responsibilities are aligned? Say for example, if it is a damage of goods or if it is a loss, how do you decipher that? How do you?
This is really a fairly complicated situation every time it occurs. Believe me, with all the contracts in place, all the understandings, all the partnerships, all the brotherhood that we talk about, when it comes to losing a couple of lakh rupees because a certain shipment, a certain consignment was damaged, there is always a lot of stress. So I think erstwhile when we were operating intermodal, it used to be a fair amount of challenge because to decide whether this damage has happened with partner A or partner B, that was the biggest thing ever, right? With multimodal, this piece has gotten sorted that I have only one vendor who's going to take care of everything for me. Now, whatever happens subsequently down the chain, they're going to sort it out between themselves. And I have a certain relationship, I am operating on certain agreement terms and he's going to honor those agreements and terms. And that's the biggest advantage of multimodal today. For example, we had, and we've had a case, and we go back to pharma because they're the most sensitive to this. I had a shipment that was going from India to Australia. The shipment failed because of a transit incursion, and the incursion happened on the tarmac, and neither the airline nor the ground staff was ready to claim responsibility. I mean, if it was intermodal, I would have been left alone to, take up a loss of a couple of $1 million. So I think responsibilities are better handled for principals through multimodal. Otherwise, it is sure a challenge whenever it comes to damages and even other losses. I mean, we've had, India is a country which faces so much. We've had a small flood in one area, you'll say, okay, there's X, Y, Z damages, and then you find out that your transporter had parked the stock with a 3PL on a temp contract. Now he's going to come up with his own side and, so stuff is going to happen, but I think ownership is much better sorted in a multimodal arrangement.
Inquisitively, what happened to the case you mentioned, $2 million? What did you do?
So we had somebody who took up the case with both these agencies in Australia, and then finally the liner chose to honor the terms.
Was it on relationship basis or on the business principle?
I would say more on a relationship basis, because that probably was out of the first few shipments that we had shipped out to Australia. So maybe they were, if it was business, they were looking at more to come.
Anything to add, Chetan?
No, I think, responsibility has to be there with the third party, whoever is handling the multimodal contract. I think it makes more sense in any ways to have a single vendor who can handle your end-to-end with the, timelines that is decided, the service levels decided. I think it makes a lot of sense rather than going piecemeal with different kind of vendors there.
You guys are very quiet today. I don't know why. Is me or is us? Any questions, please? Raise hands. Anyone? Yes, please, sir. Mike, yeah? Maybe second question ready from someone. We'll take questions in between. Otherwise, I'm walking and I'm asking a few people to ask questions. Like I can come to Manpreet and say, Manpreet, question for me.
Okay, I think I heard Chetan say that with rail and road being a combination for transport, lead times will increase. However, in the morning we heard something which said, a session where we heard that speeds have increased in the, like transit times on railways going forward are going to halve. So, is
So I
there a
think,
relationship
that
there?
applies to passenger trains in my view. I think, goods trains still run at a slower speed, much slower speed on a different gauge of lines, number one. To get them onto main gauge will take time. Plus, when you're doing multimodal, you are sending, for example, a container that I used to send in my, back in the days, some in 2008, when we started multimodal, from a factory in Manesar to the port in Chennai, or to the warehouse in Bangalore. These two places, when we used to send a full truckload straight away to our warehouse in Bangalore from Manesar, which is in Delhi, it would take about 6 days' time, right? When we used to get the container from the rail yard, Concor container, into our factory, stuff it, then bring it back to the rail yard, then ship it to the rail yard. From there, it would stand for 1 or 2 days because, of the loading or the shipment of the train. It would get offloaded in Bangalore, it would stay in the yard for 1 more day, and then it would be loaded onto the truck and went to the warehouse. So the whole chain used to take 12 days. So your inventory of 5 days used to increase, but yes, there was a reduction in cost by 12% also. So that's how it was.
Just to add to Chetan answering your question, I would like to just quote a couple of sentences here. Over the years, since evolution of this multimodal transport, look back to the days when Concor used to run. The rakes were pretty short, less numbered. Now you have longer rakes, and Adani was the first company which started a piggyback movement, which means 2 containers on a single rake. And with better railway lines being laid out and stronger and tested rail lines available, even the speed of these trains have increased. Clearances, custom clearances, and the railway processes, etc., have also been speeded up. As a result, the transit times which we used to speak even for road transport for 6 days is now 3.5 to 4 days. And going forward with this Gati Shakti coming in place, you're 100%, we should be rest assured, all of us, that things are only going to improve further and further. And therefore, multimodal for a longer route remains the best option.
Fantastic. Sorry?
In fact, I was also going to mention the same thing, that it, yeah.
Sure.
It's a function of distance, because there is going to be 2
You said that.
transfers.
Yeah, logistics is not rocket science. It's weight. I was writing down actually. Is weight, dimension, space, and your mode, right? Everything else is there right in front of you, right? You should know your industry. So, fabulous question, guys. Yeah, there was one more question.
Hi,
One-
may I ask the one?
Yes, please.
Just a quick one.
Yeah.
So we have rail, road, and sea as a main or a mode of the transport. And now we are moving away and people talking about the drone shipment and so on. So based on your views, do you think that that's going to be an important part of future transport, or at least like we being a huge population here, that would work at least 50% to solve the people's problem and be more efficient in the transportation?
Sanjay, I thought I lost the question a bit in the.
So
Yeah.
we've been talking quite a lot about different ways and means of transportation, multimodal, MM, and other stuff. In the current age of technology and different modes for last mile, like drones, how do you kind of piece these together?
So while he was mentioning
in terms of customer satisfaction, cost, and integration as well.
We are there to the question that, was supposed to go. So while we're talking about air, road, rail, by the way, multimodal has already stretched itself to bike, cycle, and something between that, and I don't know how many number of vehicles have come in. The fact today is, yes, since the customer is ready to pay, and the customer is not ready to think about environment, okay, we'll keep that aside, because the customer wants it and he's ready to pay. He doesn't care whether you use 2 liters of fuel or 2,000 liters of fuel. Hence, it is going to be possible to deliver in lesser and lesser and lesser and lesser time, there is still a lot of scope. It will cost us more, and indirectly the costs will go to the customer, because nobody can keep burning their money for delivering something which is not being paid for.
I hope this is not recorded by your company.
100%, 200%.
Yeah, and some of the customers run away if the costs go up. All right, Manpreet.
Hi, excellent panel. I think it was very, very enlightening to hear from all of you. One question which came to my mind while I was listening to you was the aspect of insurance. Because whenever we are doing an import or export, basically the maritime insurance is covered. And if you're covering, topping it up with a rail or a local, like you're saying, last mile. So what has been your experience on the insurance, which is a single document? And have you had any experience of claims? Have they been paid well? Second question. Third question comes the title. How and when does the title transfers? And with title comes the financing. Have you been able to receive financing from any international financer on a single bill of loading or a single document? Sorry, I'm asking too many questions, but then these are correlated.
Nobody can
Thank
ask
you.
3 questions. Sorry, only. Sorry. Go ahead.
I have a lot of
Quick one. Yeah.
If you want to start off, yeah.
No, I will take one question at a time. Could
Sure.
you just, yeah.
I think you can answer the first one, which is the insurance part of it, and the claim part of
So
it.
the insurance, if you have a multimodal transfer document, and insurance is mandatory. I have heard yesterday something very horrifying when I was not in Delhi, I was in Calcutta. I've been flying, so I've been losing track of places. But I heard something very horrifying yesterday on multimodalism that people are giving, when they're applying for their MTO license, they are giving an insurance coverage, which after the bill of lading, after the MTO license is obtained, they are actually cancelling the insurance policy to save on the premium. It's very short-sighted, etc. So these are one of the challenges. You should go with a reputed player. Insurance is there. There are overseas insurance companies, Indian insurance companies who are paying full if the claim is legitimate. So there's absolutely no problem. You have to just show you the credentials of the player. And that's why AMTOI is trying to become an SRO, which is a self-regulatory organization, so that we can regulate the players and not have fly-by-night operators, which sometimes doesn't. No, we come under the Ministry of Commerce, but we want, and it's under the government. What we are trying to say is be something like the Indian Chartered Accountants Association, which self-regulates. We know the rules, we know the law, so we can frame it better. Right now, someone else is framing rules for us. Yeah. So that's the thing.
Just to add to whatever he mentioned about the importance of the processes that have to be followed at the time of licensing or issue of MTO. Please make sure as a buyer of the entire service, or when you enter into a contract with the carrier, there is also something called as limitation of liability clauses. This is extremely mandatory to be noted and analyzed, because 100% claims, if you think that you're going to get it, no. Second part of it is which sector is run by whom. Though you may not be directly concerned with the damage, because you're going to claim it against the carrier who has issued the PL. But in effect, somewhere or the other during the entire process, you will be drawn into it, saying that which carrier or which agency was responsible for which leg of transportation. So the limitation of liability clauses and the sector which was catered to by which agency has to be taken care of very, very clearly, so that in future you don't get into any hassles.
I think this is another area which probably before this Gati Shakti program gets implemented, because the devil lies in the details, right? The insurance policy, as what I understand from you, insurer does a re-underwriting with sub-insurance on different parts, right? So the ownership has to be completely defined. So again, it's a great, great input that you've shared.
For us, when we enter into directly, we are concerned with the carrier who issues the MTO. That's it at the end of the day. However, as the process goes on, because it's not going to be carrier taking entire liability. First of all, as I said, the limitation will be exercised. Second thing is the carrier will have an insurance clause running with the different agencies. So that's how the process begins.
Perfect.
Of course, there are a lot of other things into it. Paucity of time, I'm sure we won't be able
See,
to.
I'm giving equal opportunity to everybody to answer 4 questions.
Wow. Okay. You should be standing
The
here and doing
next
my
one.
job. All right. I better take the mic away.
No. Title is very important in the finance part. Isn't finance important for everybody? So
Of
it
course
is,
it
of
is.
course.
Yeah, I'll still take it away. Anyone else? Anybody, any answer left? You.
So you want to repeat that question? Which one do you want us to answer?
Okay. All right. Last quick one.
It's on my board.
Title. Since it's a single document, single bill of lading or whatever document, so how does a title transfers, and do you get financing based on a single document? Your experience.
Yeah, so I think for
That's a great
principles, it's very simple. The moment I create my first document, which is the single document for me, the title transfers to my partner. I mean, obviously, it's not a proper title of goods. It's just title of ownership for a temp period. But between these various partners, there are various other documents that they have all defined. Like if it's a road and rail, there is a rail booking document and a stuffing document. As soon as the stuffing is signed, it's the responsibility of the railway, right? The trucker is out of it. And again, as soon as he signs the destuffing challan, it belongs back to the trucker. So there are documents, but I think for a principle, it still remains to be that single document. I'm going to go to my vendor and say, listen, I don't care whether a trucker did it or the railway did it. This is it. I need, as per my agreements or my contract, you will have to honor the damage.
Excellent.
I would like to add something into that.
Yeah.
As far as international transportation is concerned, marine insurance policy is more than enough. As a exporter or the importer, the policy called warehouse to warehouse. So everything is covered into that policy. We need not to rely on different partners for getting insured. Like bill of lading issue he was sharing.
Sure.
Taking bill of lading insurance is mandatory. But how much premium you want to pay, how much coverage you want to pay, that you decide. On the basis of this, you take the insurance. But when we talk about warehouse to warehouse policy, it covers from your warehouse to your consignee's warehouse. So that is only the solution for this. Second point, title of goods. In international, there is a terminology called Incoterms. If you are defined the Incoterms, then definitely you know when the title of goods is going to be transferred from X to Y, buyer to seller. So that is already defined, and I don't think so there is any risk in all these things.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
So we've had, by the way, cases erstwhile where, there were organizations who, in order to save money, used intermodal and said, okay, I'm going to ship it through X, but I'm going to do a road movement through Y, and I'm going to keep my insurances separate. And then, and I know of a senior colleague of mine who had to handle this kind of a case for 5 years before it got resolved that which one of you is actually going to pay me up? So that's
Fabulous.
the difference.
Great. So coming over to Xerrx, challenges in adopting MM. What's your thought?
Yeah, well, there are several challenges, especially in India. So just coming to one of the things that newer, like we talked about inland waterways and the development of it. Now we have one of the largest river networks in the world probably, and we're hardly using even 10% of its capacity.
Exactly.
We have a 7,500 kilometer coastline. We are hardly taking advantage of it compared to what we have started, but there's a long, long way to go. If you see a small country like Colombo, Sri Lanka, which is, in the doldrums right now, has a bit better feeder port, sort of a transshipment port in Colombo port than any of us, though we have tried relentlessly for the same. A few years ago, so as you said, 80% of the goods still go by trucks, right? And that's an environmental hazard, a huge drain on the exchequer. Our fuel bills are skyrocketingly high. Recently, a few years ago, someone tried an experiment of moving vehicles by a row of car carriers from Chennai to Kandla. And luckily it was a multinational, a Japanese giant who did it. We were the stevedores for it. And they could manage barely 3 sailings. And it was a disaster. They would come to Kandla, they would wait for 2 months or 1 month sometimes for the return leg or cargo. So bad planning, bad infrastructure, so we have not invested in our infrastructure in the proper manner. We build a port, then we build the road. No, that's not the way it's done. Okay, so if a port should have easy access by rail, road, connectivity, even I would say air freight station there, directly for pharma and other critical goods to go somewhere else.
Sure.
So there has to be a lot of thought and planning in this, and that is why I think Gati Shakti is the right method of it, if it is implemented in its correct form, because everyone's performing in different silos here, and everyone's doing what they want to do. So that is one aspect. Second aspect is digitization, which brings about a lot of paperless, and we are probably one of the most humongous paper processes in the world. But today it is getting simplified. There again, we are complicating matters. We have 3 or 4 digitization processes going on simultaneously. We are confused. Yesterday, again, I mentioned, we are confused as to which is the final digital platform that we are supposed to use as a logistics trade. You have the port community system, you have the national logistics platform and the national logistics policy with the Honorable Prime Minister is going to launch this Saturday in Delhi. Then you have the Unified Logistics Integrated Platform, which is ULIP. Then you have something else. So we are completely confused as to where to go and do what. So I would say that a special ministry has to be formed on logistics and multimodalism, dedicated, and which coordinates and brings about a proper planned investment for a multimodal model with MLP parks, etc., and also a proper digitization process.
Excellent.
Sorry, I've exceeded my time.
No worries, no worries. You recapped a few things. So just one question to each of you, one sentence answer, starting with you, Chetan, and then finishing with Raju. What's the last message on MM? Should we use it? Should we not use it? One sentence recap.
So MM, in my view, we should definitely use it because it's, one, environmental friendly.
Yeah.
I could not touch base. I can give you some numbers very quickly. If we move a cargo by air, so per gram CO2, metric ton kilometer, it is about 1,000 emissions, right? 1,037 or 40. If we do it, the same cargo through the mode of rail, it is 140. If we do it by truck, it is 140. If we do it by rail, it is 27. And if we do it by sea, it is 7. 1,040 to 7. So I think you all have the answer. That is the way to go ahead with.
Fantastic. Rajat, quick one.
So the answer is yes. The answer is yes, and I would say design for multimodal transport usage.
Design.
I think the Gati Shakti and also the national logistics policy, which is expected and everyone is literally dreaming about it, bringing 16 ministries together and forming a national policy on logistics is going to be a path breaker. And hopefully, with the speed with which the Indian government is moving around to bring down the logistics cost from a whopping 14% to about 8%, and also with the government of Maharashtra very keen in opening up multimodal parks across the state, I think we can expect some dynamic decisions to be taken, and multimodal definitely is there to stay.
Thank you very much, guys. Give a great applause for the panel. What an amazing wisdom today. Thank you, guys. Charu, need to do the honors.
Sanjay, we got 0 minutes over time.
Like
Yeah.
a true logistician, you finished bang on time.
Yeah, we hate the word overtime. Do I get an award or don't? Come on, Vinny. Let's continue. Here. It should come this way. Cannot hold stomach for long. Charu, you announcing?